This word reverence that we've been talking about all month may conjure up ideas about behaving right in religious settings, things like being quiet and obedient in church, or treating religious texts with respect, or other symbols with respect. Reverence doesn't have to be about formal religion, though. What if we just think of reverence as recognizing and actively responding to the sacred? That kind of reverence could happen all sorts of places, and it could lead to all sorts of responses and shifts in attitude. To me, reverence is recognizing and responding to the sacred wherever it shows up. It really is an overlooked virtue, this reverence. It can give us a sense of belonging, a sense of purpose, a sort of moral framework, a backdrop to see our lives against. As you know, Unitarian Universalism draws from a bunch of different sources and traditions, and a sense of the sacred can be found a little bit different flavor in each of those sources and traditions. This week, I want to talk about how the tradition of humanism connects with reverence. The humanism that we usually refer to in UU circles is a 20th century movement, but the roots are much, much older. Humanism dates back to the Italian Renaissance of the 14th century. You may remember this from history class. Before the Renaissance, most art and thought was religious. The church paid for it all, and it was almost all religious subjects. But that began to change in the 14th century in Italy, as artists and intellectuals looked beyond religion for inspiration. And they started turning to the classical themes of Greece and Rome. The Renaissance was a rebirth of classical thought, and that shift opened the door to all types of new artistic expression and discovery. But when we in UU circles talk about humanism, we talk more about a 20th century movement. It occurred right after World War I, when a sense of human optimism and possibility was in the air. Between scholars and religious leaders, the humanist ideals of equality, scientific achievement, and human dignity were at an all-time high. So a group of folks got together in 1933 and tried to write down what all of this optimism and human nature was about, and they came up with the Humanist Manifesto. 65 different people signed it. Half of those people were Unitarians, and half of the Unitarians were clergy. Humanism has been a very important strain in our tradition since that time. It included several different optimistic statements about science and equality and about the role of religion. It painted a beautiful, perhaps a little too optimistic picture about human thriving. But maybe the most important picture that it painted was about our place in the universe. This was actually what Joanne was quoting earlier in this service. After affirming that the universe is self-existing, not created, the manifesto says, in its dated language of the time, humanists believe that man is a part of nature and he has emerged as the result of a continuous process. Now, this is sort of like the 7 principles. Bold ideas can sometimes get taken for granted very easily. Yeah, the Big Bang and evolution, we get it. We know. But when we look at it with some depth, this statement offers a framework for our relationship to the world, a window into our meaning and purpose. We humans are a part of nature. We've emerged as the result of a continuous process that still continues to unfold today. Most of us are familiar with the Jewish and Christian creation story told in Genesis. Depending on how you read it, God created the world out of nothing, or perhaps created the world out of chaos. It's a particular creation story with particular values that get explored. Those values aren't absolutely clear, but century after century, people return to that story in an effort to better understand right relationship. For Native American cultures, creation happens in a very different way, actually a big variety of different ways among different communities. And for the minister's seminar, we're reading Braiding Sweetgrass, which you heard about. Robin Wall Kimmerer, in the opening pages of this book, tells the story of Sky Woman and her fall to earth. It's her people's story. Sky Woman fell to earth, bringing with her all the seeds of her home. 2 geese helped her and caught her as she tumbled toward the earth to help ease the descent. But when she first arrived, there was no land, only water. Turtle offered her a place where she could be above the water, but they knew that Sky Woman needed land. So the creatures of the earth gathered together. It took a great effort, but finally they were able to collect a little bit of mud from deep below the waters. It was actually Muskrat, the weakest of all the swimmers, who was successful. He actually sacrificed his life in the task, arriving back at the surface of the waters dead, but still clutching in his little paw a handful of mud. Sky Woman then spread this mud across the turtle's back, creating land, creating what is called by many North American peoples Turtle Island. Sky Woman's fall and the story of the original ancestors are rich with lessons of respect and mutuality. They teach about taking only what is needed and saving some for those who need it, giving back to the earth. As the author puts it, the Sky Woman story is a constant star in the constellation of teachings we call original instructions. Whether it's Sky Woman or the story of Genesis or the Big Bang, how we understand the beginning of things lays a foundation for how we see our role in the world. Again, Kimmerer writes, cosmologies are a source of identity and orientation to the world. They tell us who we are. We are inevitably shaped by them, no matter how distant they may be from our consciousness. One story leads to the generous embrace of the living world, the other to banishment. One woman is our ancestral gardener, a co-creator of the good green world that would be the home of her descendants. The other was an exile, just passing through an alien world on a rough road to her real home in heaven. For most of us here, Sky Woman isn't the story that shapes our consciousness. For most of us here, Genesis is less and less the story that shapes our consciousness. We are people invested in scientific understanding of the world. That doesn't require removing a sense of awe and wonder or mystery, though. Science can be a window into deeper appreciation of the world and our place in it. You may have heard me preach about my desire to reinterpret the Big Bang as something less violent and more life-giving. I'll briefly retell that to lift it up in my own consciousness and yours. The Big Bang is often described as a violent explosion of chaos and noise. That may be true. The Big Bang was actually so big that we can only describe it in metaphor. What if we use something more inviting, more inspiring than violence to help us understand that life-giving moment? The greatest minds of society tell us, once upon a time, all of what is our universe, all of what we know and what we have yet to see, existed in a single unit. It was infinitely small and dense and hot. And then 13.8 billion years ago, that unit began rapidly expanding and cooling and coming together. Only through complex equations can physicists speculate about what happened. It's beyond our everyday comprehension. In a short but powerful time frame, something deeply complex and beautiful was created. From an unimaginably small beginning, with the right circumstances, growth began to occur, and the universe began to organize itself into being. The Big Birth was a frightfully powerful time. There was darkness and intensely bright light. It's a wonder things turned out the way that they did. It was a baffling combination of danger and creation, beauty and pain and chaos, bringing order into being. All this drama to create a beautiful, complex, growing existence with an uncertain but hopeful future. I believe that what happened 13.8 billion years ago was more similar to a birth than a bang, and I believe we have a great deal to be grateful for as children of this incredible universe. This week, I realized another term of cosmology rubbed me the wrong way. It sounds too ominous. It's dark matter. It sounds really spooky. And dark matter makes up 85% of the universe. It's only called dark matter, though, because we can't see it and we aren't exactly sure what it is. It doesn't interact with electromagnetic fields, so we can't really detect it or measure it well. We speculate that it must be there because of the way gravity is acting. There's nothing sinister about it. It's just a fact that we don't have the measurements to understand it yet. 85% of the universe. So I've decided to liken our knowledge of dark matter to our being very young children. There are some things that children discover and that are taught by their parents. Simple shapes and colors, butterflies, chicken nuggets. The world is very simple. It's just enough exposure for them to grow mentally and emotionally. As they get older, a lot more of the world is revealed. Some of what they learn is scary, and a lot of it is really wonderful. As we mature, we're able to appreciate a broader spectrum of what's out there. So perhaps dark matter is less like the boogeyman and more like that challenging but really interesting philosophy class that you first took in college. Or it's like learning about romantic love. Dark matter could be like learning about all sorts of things that we weren't really ready to explore as children. It's waiting out there. 85% of the universe that we can't even detect well. Accepting that we are humans through and through, parts of this beautiful creation tells us something. This history of the universe that science gets closer and closer to understanding is our history. Just like we heard in our reading this morning, out of the stars have we come. Not just you and me or the United States or a particular political party. It created all of us. As our Universalist tradition has been preaching for 200 years, we are in this together, all tied up together. Deeper appreciation for the scientific view of creation can provide some good bridges for getting over some of those political global differences. And I'm not interested in supplanting other people's creation myths. I'm not interested in forcing anyone to reject their stories. I do think that there's room for us to hold multiple stories, multiple truths. One of those stories is that every last one of us is the product of the same miraculous source. And if we can wrap our heads around the fact that we're part and parcel of the universe, we come to realize that in us, the universe dreams its dreams. In us, the universe becomes self-aware. In us, the universe finds new avenues for complex creativity, emotional expression, and love. Our existence, our struggles, and our successes are not ours alone. They're part of a creative force that made us and continues to manifest through every thought and action. And I know that sounds really woo-woo, but there is nothing exaggerated about that statement. It's science through and through. In our sometimes scary and increasingly secular world, we grasp for stories to make sense of what's going on. Many people find meaning in reclaiming traditional stories. What if we also deepen into the creation myth that we claim as truth? Deepen into the grandeur of it. Deepen into the mystery of it. Let it become not just a pile of facts that we possess and have mastered, but a gateway to mystery. Let it not be a taxonomy of separate parts, but a story of our interdependence. Amen.